Hey everybody, Tim Ulbrich here, and thank you for listening to the YFP podcast, where each week we strive to inspire and encourage you on your path towards achieving financial freedom. This week, I had the pleasure of sitting down with industry pharmacist Brentsen Wolf about his journey starting the nonprofit RxTeach. We discussed the motivations behind starting RxTeach, how he was able to go from idea to getting it off the ground, the lessons he learned along the way, the future of the organization, and the efforts that RxTeach is supporting. Now, before we jump into my interview with Brentsen, I have a hard truth for you to hear. Making a six-figure income is not a financial plan. Yes, you've worked hard to get where you are today. Yes, you're earning a good income, but have you ever wondered, am I on track to retire? How do I prioritize and fund all the competing financial goals that I have? How do I plan financially for big upcoming life events and changes like moving, having a child, changing jobs, getting married, or retiring? And why perhaps am I not as far along financially at this point in my career as I thought I would be? One of the answers may be that your six-figure income is not a financial plan. As a pharmacist, yes, you have an incredible tool in your toolbox, your salary, but without a vision and a plan, that good income will only go so far. That's in part why we started Your Financial Pharmacist back in 2015. At YFP, we support pharmacists at every stage of their careers to take control of their finances, reach their financial goals, and build wealth through comprehensive fee-only financial planning and tax planning. Our team of certified financial planners and tax professionals work with pharmacists all across the United States and helps our clients set their future selves up for success while living a rich life today. If you're ready to see how your financial pharmacist can support you on your financial journey, you can visit yourfinancialpharmacist.com/learn to learn more about our services. Again, that's yourfinancialpharmacist.com/learn. All right, let's jump into my interview with Brentsen Wolf, founder of RxTeach. Brentsen, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you.
Well,
Good
this
to be
is
here.
a treat for me. You and I connected a couple years back when you were doing your industry fellowship with Merck through the Rutgers program, and we collaborated on some personal finance sessions with the fellows, which we've done now for a few years, which has been a lot of fun and has been a joy. And before we get into the work that you've been doing with the nonprofit RxTeach, and we're excited to share more of that story and the journey that led to that work and the impact that you're having. Tell us more about your career story in pharmacy. What led you into the profession? What led to the interest in industry and the work that you're doing now?
Yeah, it's a good question, especially because I think coming from the Midwest, and I know we're both
Mm-hmm.
Midwest guys, the kind of interesting opportunities for PharmDs outside of retail and hospital aren't thrown at you in school the
Yep.
way they are in some of the coastal areas. So, yeah, my journey to where I'm at now is convoluted and stressful in some ways, but also just I think I ended up where I needed to be. So I graduated from Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville in 2021. And like I said, Midwest thought retail
Yep.
or inpatient pharmacy. I worked in both of those areas and, during school and just wasn't sure that it was really for me. I learned in probably my P3 year that these fellowships existed, and I was glad to connect with you at some point to bring you into those folds because I know the fellows don't know anything about personal finance.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly didn't, so those are very helpful sessions. And I'm glad we collaborated in that way. But yeah, I ended up at Merck doing a medical affairs fellowship in mostly solid tumors, did a little bit of work in infectious diseases as well, and just absolutely loved it. I knew I had found what I was looking for in a career. It actually
Mm-hmm.
drew me in. I was very passionate about all of the work I was doing. And so I actually transitioned after fellowship over to AstraZeneca, which is where I'm at now, working in thoracic malignancies as a medical science liaison, which again, couldn't be happier. I'm back where I grew up, surrounded by family. I've got a 1-year-old daughter now, so that part's important. It's cheaper living here than New York City, where some of my colleagues live. So yeah, I couldn't complain, and that's kind of how I ended up where I am now.
Yeah, you've got the sought after sweet gig of working in an industry position, but living in an affordable cost of living area. We
Yeah,
work with a lot of industry pharmacists that make a great income, certainly, but often cost of living is a challenging part of the plan. So,
sure.
it, certainly happy for you and where that career has progressed. Let's talk about the nonprofit organization that you started, RxTeach, and tell us about what exactly is RxTeach and ultimately how did it come to be? How did it get started?
Yeah, RxTeach was a brainchild I had during fellowship, and for whatever reason, I thought I had enough free time to start this thing. So if that tells you anything about work-life balance as a fellow versus maybe a resident,
Hmm.
that might be a bit insightful. So I ended up, just saying, screw it. I just want to do something. I wanted my own platform. I wanted to be able to say and talk about things that were important to me. And so it started this website. And honestly, the thought of it becoming a nonprofit organization was in my head, but I was too busy. I didn't know what I was doing. It was down the line. So really, it started off almost like a blog, right? Just
Hmm.
kind of
I
writing about
remember
the stuff
that.
I care about.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. I remember. I think you were one of the first people I talked to about it. So
Hmm.
we really focus on a couple of different areas as a nonprofit. The two main ones, though, are preventative medicine education, and the second one is cancer, essentially broadly speaking.
Hmm.
So we write a lot about those topics, but we also write about pretty much across the board anything that could contribute to pharmacists or really any healthcare professions understanding of a certain topic. So we'll do journal clubs, lifestyle management stuff. And we do all of that via essentially a weekly email, sometimes more
Yep.
than weekly. We've gathered a following and a community now that we're very proud of. And like I said, we don't keep a cent of anything, to be
Hmm.
honest with you. It all gets donated. And that's because RxTeach at its core is still just a passion project and a hobby for the board, all of the board
Hmm.
members. We keep it very balanced. It's in terms of work life balance. The second this feels like a job, we won't do it.
Yep.
But we're very passionate about these topics, and so it's been very easy for us to maintain this kind of work life balance
Hmm.
with RxTeach and still be able to provide scholarships and funds to students in the local communities like we always sought after. So
So the website, we'll link to this in the show notes, rxteach.com, so our listeners can check it out as well. Brentsen, you mentioned we when you talked about some of the content in the articles. Is that you and the board? Are there other people that are contributing? Tell us about what that model looks like. I know content creation can be a labor
yeah,
of love, so I'm curious to hear more.
yeah, it's definitely it is a big we. So I frequently write for the website. My co-founder Kristen Lindauer, who's a PGY1 trained pharmacist and is now an HIV ambulatory care pharmacist over in Virginia,
Mm.
also frequently writes. But we highlight student work constantly. It was one of the things that was important to us because I didn't think I had opportunities to really showcase my work or understanding or maybe some niche topics that I cared about as a student. So now we have students write for us all the time. You
Mm.
can go look at the website and see who has done that in the past. Oftentimes, if they write for us once, they'll write for us again because it's a decent experience. So students write for us. We also get other residents writing, pharmacy residents, current fellows will write. Healthcare providers in any field. So we have day in the life series of like a veterinary
Hmm.
pharmacist, a retail pharmacist, an oncology pharmacist, etc. So we really highlight the full gambit. But we, like I said, we do have particular interest in preventative medicine and cancer, just because that's where all of our money goes to. So content on that is obviously a big part of it. So, for instance, we have a whole series on how to prescribe exercise, which I
Hmm.
think is a big. You don't get that in pharmacy school,
No.
right? Not to get on my soapbox, but honestly, like if a patient were to ask any given pharmacist or physician, like, "Hey, I want to prevent cardiovascular disease. How do I do that?" You're not going to get a very in-depth answer generally. You're going to get
Yeah.
30 minutes 5 times a week of moderate intensity exercise, and that's just to me not a good enough response, right? And that's the purpose of this whole thing is how do we hash that out and really educate people on how would you respond to that patient in a way that I think is sufficient. And I do say it's subjective,
Sure.
but that's the point of the organization. So
It's funny you mentioned that, Brenton. I was just thinking about this. I'm listening to a 6-part podcast series. One of my favorite shows, the Huberman Lab podcast. You may
yeah, of
be
course.
familiar.
Yeah,
And he did a 6-part series. His content's just fantastic. But he did
yeah,
a 6-part series on sleep with Matthew Walker. And it was one of those things I'm listening to. And it's like, okay, think of all the things we learned about in pharmacy school about prescribing
yep,
sleep medications and mechanism of action. Is this going to help, latency and onset and people falling asleep versus what? Know nothing about like prevention and the actual like mechanics of sleep, and it's like
yes,
yes, what you're saying, so true, right?
yeah,
It's that we have such a strong focus obviously on the treatment, makes sense,
yep,
pharmacists, but it's like wow, the preventive aspect. and I remember even learning some of those things where it's like sleep hygiene and
Yeah.
self-care, and we're like yada yada yada, like maybe there'll be a question there, right? But what do I
Sure.
need to know about the drugs, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree, and I don't think the healthcare system is even currently set up to understand the impact that, preventative education
Hmm.
could even bring, which is why we're so interested in it.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah,
huge gap, and it's not just pharmacists, I wanna say that.
that's right, that's right.
It's physicians, nurses, PAs, whatever. You're not learning this in school, so really people have to
Hmm.
self-educate at this point, which is a bummer, but we hope to help make that easier, really,
That's right.
for those people.
What is the passion behind the preventive medicine, the cancer focus? Those are really the two pillars that I'm hearing you
Yeah.
share about. Where does that passion, where does that interest come from?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, and then you seem like a fit guy. I've always been into exercise and lifestyle management, and Kristen Lindauer also has been too. I mean, she's in better shape than me in certain ways. She just ran a marathon in 3 hours and 27 minutes, I think. So
No way.
she's a superstar.
Respect.
Yeah, I mean, I hope
Yeah.
to get that fast eventually, but fitness has always been something that we have been passionate about and have felt, at least anecdotally for ourselves, the incredible benefits. And then all of a sudden, you start seeing these publications around longevity and what contributes to it. So anything from how a VO2 max can
Hmm.
predict your overall survival over a 10-year period, and how grip strength is associated with preventing hip fractures in the
Hmm.
elderly, and all of these things start to stack on top of each other and really paint the picture of how important fitness lifestyle management is to preventing disease. And so it's an area where I can easily nerd out in, and just dive very deep into the data, and I write about it frequently. So it was an obvious pillar, and plus I had identified it as unmet need. I really
Hmm.
think we need more of this information out there, and we need to encourage current students, to look for this type of data so they can incorporate it into their practices once they graduate. As for cancer, I think about it in my head as we're attacking the two
Yeah.
sides of healthcare: preventative and then the sickest patients, right? And I started doing breast cancer genetics research before I ever even got into pharmacy school. So oncology was a huge passion of mine. I had a mentor named Dr. Ronald Worthington who really drove me towards that kind of thing. It's why I almost went and did a PhD, right? And so I just, anyone with cancer, you know what this is like. It's a tough field to be into a lot of the times. I think
Hmm.
biologically, it's extremely interesting. So again, it's easy for me to write about because I have so
Yep.
much passion for it. But we need people that are willing to go into this space if we're ever going to take care of cancer. And cancer is not something you just cure, right? There's thousands of tumor types. I mean, it's not how it works. I know the general public thinks, oh, what's the cure for cancer? It's not going to be one thing, I can guarantee
Hmm.
it. But we need pharmacists, we need physicians, nurses that grow a passion for oncology early, and then are
Hmm.
willing to really put in the time down the line and hopefully start kicking away at these patient outcomes, which are historically not. I mean, you take
Yeah.
metastatic lung cancer, 5-year overall survival rates of less than 10%. I mean, that's
Hmm.
not great. Obviously, still unmet needs. So these are the
Yeah.
areas we've chosen to focus on, again, for passion and impact.
Yeah, and I love what you've built because to me, and I can hear the passion in your voice. I can hear the energy and excitement, right? You're building something that's taking an area of interest for you, one that
Yep.
you're naturally going to be excited about, creating content, getting others involved in, that you're then able to teach others, of which has more impact, right? And I would assume that's energizing as well, as you see,
Yep.
hey, people are learning about things that maybe they otherwise wouldn't have learned about, and it's written in a way that you can connect from a pharmacist to pharmacist perspective,
Yep.
and the media need, right? And ultimately leading to scholarships and other efforts that are having a benefit. So that has the ingredients, I think, that are so important that we often talk about on the for-profit side of a business,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
here we're talking about the nonprofit side, which is equally, if not more important. I'm curious to hear more about, you started, I heard you say, hey, I just got started, right?
Yeah.
I just got started. I knew I wanted to create my own platform. I didn't necessarily think, or I couldn't see all the dots connect of how this would become a 501c3. Maybe that was an idea that
Yeah.
loosely you held. But ultimately you went that direction, and it very much could have been a blog site that turned into a for-profit
Yep.
membership community, a lot of different models that are out there. What was that juncture decision point where you said, hey, I'm going to keep forward with this educational mission, but I really do want to make it into a nonprofit effort?
Yeah. Yeah, you briefly mentioned it, and it's based off of passion. And I think if you can articulate well for yourself what is actually going to drive you and prevent you from burning out, that's how you make this decision. For me, if I knew that if I was trying to do this stuff, as in a for-profit matter, just to make money for myself, which I honestly don't, I see no issues with that. I just know that I would have personally burned out on it.
Yeah.
It would have become work instead of a passion project. I would have been chasing metrics that, as a nonprofit, if I don't make $1 million, it does not bother me. I'm giving as much money away as I possibly can.
Hmm.
And if I don't hit a specific number, it doesn't hurt me personally. I think if it
Yeah.
was a for-profit model, those numbers would have gotten into my head a little bit more. It would have affected my mentality towards RxTeach in general. And I was just trying to avoid that. And so, you know, getting the board together, a group of people that were on the same page is like, hey, we're just doing this in our free time. This is passion driven 100%. And however many dollars we can donate, that's the goal.
Hmm.
And we're going to get that number as big as we can get it, but we're not going to kill ourselves doing it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how we landed on this model, because I've got a 1-year-old daughter at home. I got a full-time job, all these things. You gotta make sure it's driven by the right
Yeah.
motivation, or you're not going to make it.
I like that because I think I was sharing with someone recently that when we think about a lot of the burnout that we're seeing in our profession, and to be honest, it's not just pharmacy, right? I think the healthcare
Yeah,
workforce at large, obviously the impact of the pandemic and other factors in there as well. I think something like this, not to suggest you have to go out and start your own nonprofit, but
sure.
being involved in an effort, whether that's an investment of time, money, both, right? I think that participation in something bigger than the grind of what you're doing every day, even for those that say, "Hey, I love my job," great.
Yeah,
There's still a lot of stressing me involved. You've got a one year old child at home. Like life's busy, right? And I
yeah,
think, for us to kind of go back to our roots and say, hey, why did we get interested in healthcare in the first place? I think we lose that sometimes over time. And just an encouragement to listeners, whether it's getting involved in RxTeach, whether it's getting involved something local in your community or both, great. Like,
hmm,
what are some of those initiatives and opportunities where people can get involved? And I think that naturally can be in part an antidote to some of that burnout that we so often see. So curious, certainly, to hear you tie that directly back to that decision, that strategic move you made to go into the nonprofit direction.
yeah,
How do you not make money, right? That's for profit language, but how do
sure.
you ultimately raise funds that get delivered in the form of scholarships? Is it individual donations? What is the predominant ways in which you're raising money as an organization?
Yeah, so right now we do it in three different ways, right? So the first way, and what we started off at the beginning, is that, hey, this is going to be a free resource for anyone to read and do with what they want. And we're going to go deep into data. We're going to do all these things. If you care about our mission and you want to get this content with a small monthly donation, we're going to let you do that. And so we just set up a couple of different subscriber levels
Oh,
based
that's
on that.
cool.
Yeah, paid members get some extra stuff, maybe an extra article here and there, but really it is like, hey, if you find value in this and care about what we're doing, it's always going to be free. And we have, because we want to change the community, right? If you
Hmm.
can't afford it, I'm not going to make you pay for it. But if you want to contribute, feel free to do that. So we have a subscriber based model, which is probably where we get the most of our money.
Okay.
We also have a couple of digital assets, which are pretty new, that I actually have enjoyed this process a lot. So we have some cheat sheets on things like cirrhosis, sickle cell disease. We have a how-to guide for Journal Club, which I
I
absolutely
could have
love.
used that one in
Yeah,
pharmacy
yeah, I
school,
know. I
man.
totally agree
Jeez.
with that. Back to pharmacy school days, Kristen put that together, which I think it was important for a resident, or someone with
Hmm.
residency experience to do that, because
Yeah.
she puts pearls in there about like what questions can you expect your preceptor to ask you, so that
Hmm.
you can prepare for this journal club. Where in an article can you find this information? Whether it's New England Journal of Medicine or Journal of Oncology, whatever it is, JAMA. So that's a great resource. And we've also paired up with Dr. Alex Poppin, who wrote a book
Yeah.
called High Powered Medicine. Yeah,
Hmm.
so we sell his book on the website, and we have an agreement in place that
Oh,
we're like, we
cool.
split the profits for that, which we're very thankful to him to contribute to RxTeach in that way as well. So digital assets is the second piece. And then the third piece is just like you said, one-time donations. Anyone who wants to give money based off of hearing this podcast,
Hmm.
or you ran into me at a bar and I was telling you about grip strength, and you're like, oh, that's interesting. So people can certainly do that on the website, just one-time donations, and of
Hmm.
course we appreciate that. And then, like I said, we have partnered with local universities to actually allocate the funds in the form of scholarships in those areas I've already mentioned. But that's how we actually bring the cash in.
So one of the things I'm always curious to hear from people that start anything, for profit, nonprofit, is, it's one thing to have an idea, it's another thing to execute on an
Sure.
idea. And that's a big step. And for some people, it's the actual mechanics. For others, it's the fear of, hey, what if nobody kind of likes the idea of what I
Yeah.
have out there? What if this isn't successful? You obviously took those steps, which, are great that you did. It led to the platform and what you have here now, and certainly something you can continue to build off of. But talk us through some of those early mechanics and decisions. You're talking about a board, you talked about 501c3. Like, I think sometimes, even though you haven't been doing this that long, sometimes we
Yeah.
blow past those things. Like, hey, those happen, but those are big milestones that often can be
Sure.
barriers. So talk to us about those early stages involved going from idea to actually getting to the point where you can meet someone
Yeah.
at a bar or conference or whatever and say, hey, you can make a tax deductible donation, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, it's a great question. And it is, there's multiple steps, but before I get into that, I just want to say that, like, if you're thinking about doing something, whether it's a nonprofit, for profit, blog, side project, whatever it is, there's never going to be a perfect time. I hear all
Totally.
the time, like, oh, once I get X number of dollars in the bank, or once I get to this place in my career, that's when I'll do this. And I can tell
Mhm.
you, ever since having my first child, there's no perfect time. It's always going to be hard in some fashion. There's always going to be some kind of challenges, and you're going to meet those along the way and overcome them, and feel good about that. So stop waiting is my first piece of advice.
Mhm.
Just take the first step, and if it goes slowly, if it takes a long time, or it's really difficult up front, that's fine. It was never going to be super easy, right? So that's
Mhm.
my first piece. But in terms of actually doing the nonprofit stuff specifically, I was working with a lawyer in our family, which certainly helped me. But talking with someone who has done this in the past is definitely a first step, and just feel out what you need. So things like your bylaws, your articles of incorporation,
Mhm.
your employee identification number application, your conflict of interest statement. These are that's kind of the four core things you really need up front to register with your state. And you actually start at the state level. You don't go straight
Mhm.
to the federal government. You have to, become a corporation in the state level. Once you do that, that's when you can actually send in some of the documentations at the federal level. And hopefully, if you're working with people who have done this before, when you actually put in your stuff with the state, you're putting in there that you intend to be a
Yep.
501c3. You're making sure that you meet the criteria for nonprofit. So you need to go do some research on, you have to be in certain areas in order to qualify for
Mhm.
nonprofit tax exempt status. So you want to word everything from your mission statement to your bylaws to support the fact that this is going to be a nonprofit organization. You do all of that stuff upfront first, before ever talking with the federal government.
Yep.
For us, we were able to send in what's called an EZ application, literally capital E, capital Z,
Mhm.
because we were bringing in less than $50,000 a year annually. That's kind of the cutoff. Even if you are making less than that, you can do a full-fledged application if you wish to. But it's certainly, if you're bringing in $1 million in your first year, you can't use this
Yep.
easy application. It's one piece of paper, front and back, and I just checked no for everything, right? It was very
Mhm.
easy. But once you get back your EIN and you'll get an official letter from the government saying, like, hey, we recognize you as a 501c3. That's when you can start to reap some of the benefits of the nonprofit. So things like, we use Stripe to
Mhm.
bring in money from our website, and Stripe has nonprofit rates that we can utilize. A lot of these third-party vendors will have nonprofit rates,
Yep.
and sometimes it's not public. You got to go look on Reddit, like, hey, is there a special rate for so and so, and go take advantage of that. But after that, you are going to file some stuff even once you hear back from the federal government, and that's going to be annually, like federal income tax, your state income tax. In Illinois, you have to at least register with the attorney general.
Same here. Mhm.
Stuff like that. It's paperwork. That's always going to be a small part of this, and I think staying organized is important. But again, just take a breath. If you're new to all this legal stuff like I was, it can seem a little bit like I don't even know what I'm doing, but at the end of the day, it's just paperwork. If you're an
Mhm.
organized person, you're going to be fine. And I certainly don't think it's anything that should prevent you from doing this. Again, if things get off to a rocky start, like, especially in a nonprofit sense, who cares? You're doing this for a very good reason,
Mhm.
right? Like, be easy on yourself. Just get there eventually, and let things sort them out as they will.
I'm with you on the, I've kind of gone down this twice now in the last 6 months. You and I talked a little bit about this. We started the nonprofit YFP Gives, and your overview was great, by the way, from state to federal level. That was spot
Oh,
on.
thanks.
So if anyone's looking for like a checklist or at least just a frame of reference of the steps involved, that was fantastic. The first time we went through it, we used an attorney. So helpful, right? Because
Yeah,
it seems so overwhelming until you can see it. And to your point, there's, shortened forms based on your projected revenue and other things, but just to see the process from a state level up to the 501c3. Okay, now that you've done that, you've got to register with the attorney general on the state level. You got to file this solicitation form. It's like for
yeah,
someone to just be able to say do X, Y, and Z, I can assure you is well worth the fee.
yes,
But I respect that that can be a barrier.
yeah,
Second time I went through it, which was something not non-related on the pharmacy side. We Easy application was the form. I had been through it. I kind of saw all the steps and I felt
sure,
comfortable like navigating that part myself, seeing all the people, but I couldn't have wrapped my arms around it
yeah,
the first time. So I think that's something as folks are thinking about this, anticipating those legal fees. And I
yes,
think it is something that certainly does add a lot of value as you're
yeah.
going through it. So great overview
Yeah, and
of
actually, I
that
want
thing.
to add one thing, Tim. The one of the values that the attorney can bring in is not only make sure you file the right paperwork, but oftentimes these folks have worked with corporations in the past, and they kind of know over the years what problems might arise,
Yeah.
and so they will give you recommendations on how to maybe word bylaws and this kind of
Yes.
thing to prevent an issue that would happen if you wouldn't have taken this step up front. So that's a
Hmm.
very important thing. I talk about preventative medicine. You might as well be preventative on this front as well. And an attorney can do that.
That's great. Um, let's talk about the future, Brenton. So as you look out over the next 5, 10, 15 years, however long you want to go out for the vision, what does success look like for RxTeach? You've taken this important step from idea to going through all the mechanics, the legal stuff we just started, getting to the point where you can take tax deductible donations. You've been creating content for a while. What does the next iteration look like for RxTeach in terms of the work that you're doing and
Mhm.
how you would measure success?
Yeah, so I think we're constantly trying to assess community change, at least locally, and so that has started to happen already. RX teaches, I think influencing folks locally, and that's great news, and it's specifically on these topics of interest.
Hmm.
But like big picture goal in the next 10 years would be to essentially expand our scholarship availability to more or less every pharmacy school in the country
Love
and
it.
also get outside of pharmacy school. So we started with pharmacy just because that's our background, but we've already started working with some schools of exercise science, mostly
Mm.
because, in my perfect world, those two things come together a lot more than they currently do. Taking
Hmm.
that preventative side of healthcare into the healthcare provider's actual education. Again, that's the area of unmet need. So, scholarships across the country is what we want to be known for. So, where if you can show that you're actually interested in these very important topics, we're going to give you money. And I feel no guilt at all about putting dollar signs in front of certain topics in order to
Hmm.
drive people towards, well, maybe I'll at least look up what that means if I want to
Right.
try to get this scholarship. That's fine with me. I have no guilt on that kind of
Hmm.
thing. And then of course building out the types of people who are willing to write for RxTeach and just help get our message out there. Cardiac disease is the number one killer of Americans. It kills
Hmm.
more people than liver disease and diabetes and stroke, and it combined, it's ridiculous.
Hmm.
So the more we can prevent these types of things, and however we're going to do that, whether it's scholarships, putting out more content, selling more stuff to fund these types of events, that's what we're going to do. And again, I guess the number one thing for 10 years is don't burn out, right?
Yeah,
So
that's right.
keep finding that passion, make sure I'm keeping me and the rest
Hmm.
of the board ignited about what we're doing, and just following that passion.
As my partner Tim often says, it's a marathon, not a sprint. I think
Yeah,
that's true here as well, right? You've got an important mission that transcends not only 10 years, but transcends your career.
sure.
And to me, what I hear you doing, which I love, is you're getting others involved. This is not a Brentsen initiative. This is a
No,
board. This is a bigger initiative. And as those tentacles get out further, it's not about you and the face and the name. It's about the impact, right, that you
yeah,
can have. And that impact, I presume, isn't going away. So when you say in 30, 40 years, like, hey, it's time for someone else to take the reins, like you've got other people that you've delegated and gotten involved along the way. This has been awesome. I appreciate you taking the time. Again, Make sure to check out the website. We'd love for our community to not only learn about what you're doing, get involved financially, reach out to Brentsen and the team. If you've got ideas for content that you'd like to contribute, make a donation. If there's a connection or a relationship that you think would be helpful, make sure to reach out to do that. As Brentsen says on the website, every cent will be given to students as merit-based scholarships in cancer research and preventative medicine education. So if you make RxTeach a part of your giving plan, know that that's going to be going to good use. So Brentsen, thanks so much for taking time to come on the show.
Thanks, Tim. Really appreciate it.
As we conclude this week's podcast, an important reminder that the content on this show is provided to you for informational purposes only and is not intended to provide and should not be relied on for investment or any other advice. Information in the podcast and corresponding materials should not be construed as a solicitation or offer to buy or sell any investment or related financial products. We urge listeners to consult with a financial advisor with respect to any investment. Furthermore, the information contained in our archived newsletters, blog posts, and podcasts is not updated and may not be accurate at the time you listen to it on the podcast. Opinions and analyses expressed herein are solely those of your financial pharmacist unless otherwise noted and constitute judgments as of the dates published. Such information may contain forward-looking statements which are not intended to be guarantees of future events. Actual results could differ materially from those anticipated in the forward-looking statements. For more information, please visit yourfinancialpharmacist.com/disclaimer. Thank you again for your support of the Your Financial Pharmacist podcast. Have a great rest of your week.